Welcome everyone to Startup Stories. As some of you know, I have a day job as CEO of Kobo, the e-reading company that started here in Toronto and has expanded all over the world. But I have another also great volunteer job as the chief entrepreneur of AgeWell. And in this role, I get to spend time with the startups that have connected to AgeWell as they're going from idea to product and from product to business. We have assembled four entrepreneurs. We've got them all here who are on the cutting edge of age tech in all of its many forms. And from them, we can get a view into what it takes to be a Canadian, to get a Canadian startup off the ground in this sector. The tricks and tips, the challenges, the things that help and hinder. These panels often begin with the moderator reading 6 or 7 minutes of bio and company descriptions, but these people can pitch themselves far better than I ever could. So I'm going to turn it over to them for some quick intros. So I'll ask in 2 minutes or less, tell us who you are, what your company is, what it does, and what stage are you at? Are you at concept? Are you at prototypes? Are you in trials? Are you out in the market? And we will start with Elizabeth Odette Bordeaux.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. Super excited to be here today. So my name is Elizabeth. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wellbe, and we have a platform for senior living communities. So pretty much we're helping them personalize the experience of their residents. So it's all about getting to understand their residents, what they like, what they don't like, what could get them out of their room, and then helping and supporting the teams into organizing a program that will reflect their community and then be able to evaluate this program. All this while staying up to date with all the regulations, making sure that everybody's being engaged with and that there's no social isolation into the communities. So that's my quick, short description of what Wellbe does. Where we at today, super excited to share that we're all over Canada right now. We're in hundreds of communities, having impacts into tens of thousands of lives already. And we've been supported by AgeWell since day one when Wellbe was just an idea. So very excited to share our path all the way to here today. And obviously this is just the beginning. So looking forward to spread all the way across to the United States by the end of this year.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. I'll now pass it over to Azadeh Dastmalchi, who's the CEO of Vital Tracer.
Thank you for the time. I'm Azadeh Dastmalchi, CEO of the Vital Tracer. Vital Tracer is a medical startup located in Montreal. And we are concentrating on a wearable technology. So it's a watch on a wrist or a patch on a chest. I need to emphasize that it's a medical device, and so it's a very different compared with the Apple Watch and Samsung and other gadget that we specified that we are measuring a blood pressure without cuff using optical sensor and AI technology. We are now in a pre-commercialization phase. We applied for our Health Canada approval 6 months ago. We are still waiting. We are running 2 clinical trials right now in Montreal Hospital and Children's Hospital in Montreal as well, to test it on newborns at the NICU and adult at the ICU level. And here I am.
Thank you, Azadeh. And now, Stuart Hardy.
Thanks very much, Michael. Thanks everybody for attending today. I really appreciate your time. I know it's very valuable. I am Stuart Hardy. I'm the founder of TeneraCare. We're based out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. In essence, we started off as being an automated nurse call system, so we didn't want to rely on the 90-year-old resident with dementia to have to push a button or find a button to understand when they needed help. But we've become so much more than that. We exist today to help families live a happier, healthier, and safer lives. Our platform provides reliable, modern, real-time technology to senior living facilities to monitor and analyze the health platforms and patterns and activities that impact the safety of residents and staff, reducing risk and changing behaviors, providing you with the best possible setting to provide care to residents and better work conditions for staff. Our Tenera platform solution is fully managed cloud service, so it's not disruptive. You know, when we install one of our platforms in your home, we're not in there renovating your house. Currently, we're in market. We're in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Ontario, and we're going to be expanding into the US next week. So thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Stuart. And finally, Pooja Viswanathan.
Hey, happy to be here. Really excited to be part of this panel today. And I'm here as CEO and co-founder of Braze Mobility. We make blind spot sensors for wheelchairs, and this whole thing kind of came about when I was actually a researcher and been supported actually quite a bit by AgeWell. Was a postdoctoral fellow and looking at ways in which we could improve safety and independence for older adults in long-term care. And that was sort of my origin story, and looked at sensor technologies and what we could do to improve that. And then in 2016, co-founded and launched Braze Mobility blind spot sensors. And so here, fast forward to 2021, we now have a fairly major presence in the US and Canada. We work with some of the top dealers in North America, have reps in over 30 states, and work actually quite closely with the VA. In fact, recently we we're a collaboration winner at one of their challenges and are working with them as a collaboration partner as well. So by VA, I mean Veterans Affairs in the US. So one of our major customers, and we're continually looking to expand. We're now going to be expanding overseas soon as well, in Australia and New Zealand, and hopefully into Europe as well. So very excited, and just really looking forward to some of the topics we're going to be covering today.
Thanks so much, Pooja. And it's a question that I should ask of the others as well, because origin stories are really interesting. It's neat to know where the ideas came from. And so I'd love to take just a couple of minutes with each of you. And Pooja, maybe I'll start with you. Like, where did that first idea come from, and when did you think that this could be a business?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did not get into this thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. I started off as I was just freshly graduated out of a computer science program. I'd actually graduated out of a bioinformatics program. And so I was kind of at this intersection of computer science and health technology, but then realized I didn't have the patience for life science research and wanted to do something that was a bit more tangible and where I could see outcomes within my lifetime. So hats off to life science researchers, but just didn't have it in me. And ended up pivoting into assistive technology and ended up at the Intelligent Assistive Technology and Systems Lab at University of Toronto with Dr. Alex Mihailaides, and started working on a project there, which was a smart wheelchair project. And to be honest, when I started, it was really just seemed like a cool idea. They were looking at sensor technologies that would automatically stop a wheelchair if it got too close to an obstacle. And really all that was going through my head at the time was, wow, this is really great. I get to work on cool robotic stuff. I get to crash test a chair, and I get paid for doing all of that. So, sign me up. But it really turned into a passion and calling when I actually went into a long-term care facility during my internship at IATSO at the lab with Alex, and saw long-term care residents there slumped over in manual chairs, didn't have the strength to self-propel, weren't being allowed to use power mobility. And that's really when it hit me as a violation of human rights, and that there were these major safety considerations, and kind of seemed kind of crazy that here we were in the 21st century and we hadn't really figured this problem out. Meanwhile, cars were coming out with all sorts of sensor technologies for similar issues to keep us safer on the road. So that's how it all started for me. Did a PhD, did my postdoc, and really the only reason I did all that was because that seemed to be the only place where I could work on this problem. It was not a problem that was being addressed in industry. And the technology was also in its very, very early stages. I mean, we were pioneering this stuff. My dream was that we would come up with some technology that we would license off to a big company, and that would be that. But when fast forward to 2016, there was still no industry, there was still no company solving this problem, and it didn't seem like any of the big players were interested. It really opened up an opportunity for a startup, and so I had to then make that leap.
And as Azadeh, I'll ask you the same question. Like, when did you first feel like the idea was going to be something more than an idea?
So it starts from the real story of my dad, who suffered from hypertension. He was diagnosed, and his medical doctor asked him to measure his blood pressure a couple of times. My daughter is sick today. She didn't go to the daycare, so you're gonna hearing crying background noises while at the same time.
No problem.
I bought a cuff devices which just goes on an arm, but he didn't use it, and it was a couple of times repeating the same situation. And I find that he needed something in terms of verbal that do it everything's automatically. It was a 2010. At that time, I was searching, couldn't find anything. So at the same time, I was starting my master in biomedical engineering at University of Ottawa, and I find that it's a very good topic to start as a R&D. But then in 2015, I find that it's a very good topic to make it a reality, because it's not only my dad problem, it's lots of parents problem. And we want them to live longer, healthier, and independent. And I find that, you know what, let's convert this one to the real startup to make it happen. And at the same time, I continue my study with the PhD in the same field, same area, same supervisor, same university.
That's great. Thank you. Elizabeth, how about you?
For me, it was a story of my grandpa. He started being sick, and it was very, very heavy on my family. And my dad was driving about 2 hours a day to go check up on him and make sure that everything was fine. So we decided to put him into a senior living community, thinking his health would at least stay the same or even get better, because he was joining a community, he was joining new people, he was going to be interacted with. And then sadly, it did the opposite, and he passed away a few months later. And for me, it was really the moment where I was like, okay, this can't happen to anybody else. This can't happen to other member of my family. We have to find a solution. And that's when I realized that the people that are supposed to be there for my grandpa were actually overwhelmed and had literally zero tools. Like, they're just doing everything on paper, running everywhere, and they needed the help and support in order to be able to provide the care they want to provide.
And Stuart, for you, when did it go from light bulb to real business?
Well, you know, I share a similar story to the other people on this panel today. It's family driven for me. I had an experience with my grandmother. She was in a long-term care home. She was on dialysis every day or every second day. And she had some obviously kidney issues, and she got up in the middle of the night and she fell, and nobody knew that she had fallen. And when they finally found her, there was nothing they could do for her any longer, and they had to let her go. And to me, I felt, you know, this was in 2010. I felt, you know, this is a little ridiculous that today's day and age, that a method for a resident to get help is a string on the wall in the bathroom and a button they can hardly find by their bedside. And that's the reality of it. I mean, my father and my stepmother just passed away in long-term care this summer. Same thing. She was in dementia in her 90s, and she couldn't get help when she needed it. So I felt, you know, that this is the time that maybe I could help out and create an automated nurse call system. So with our system, you know, if somebody gets out of bed, if that's a care protocol for that person, then the staff are alerted. They don't have to worry about 3 o'clock in the morning with that bump in the night. So that was the big motivator for us to try to make a difference and bring, you know, the nurse call system back up to where it should be in the 2000s. But also, you know, the spin-off on that is the data and analytics that we found from that. So now we have a true understanding of how much time they spend in bed, the frequency of the washroom visits, their interactions with other staff and with other residents. So we have so much more to learn from a simple automated nurse call system that we created 6 years ago. I'm really excited for that part of it.
You're all working in a sector that obviously everybody in this, you know, in this audience finds really exciting, that intersection of technology and aging. But there's some characteristics about working in the sector that are different than other technology sectors, other places where you could start a startup. What makes starting a company in AgeTech different than if you were in some other part of the tech sector? You know, what's the thing that people miss or don't understand about AgeTech startups? And Elizabeth, you've been involved in starting a couple of different companies over time. So I'm going to start with you. How do you contrast the difference between those experiences?
For me, it's always been about having that passion behind starting something. Like, the ups and downs that represent running a startups are just way too, like, it's just too hard. If you don't have the passion, if you don't just know why you're doing it, then you won't want to go to bed late or wake up early to run your business. So for me, it's always been passion for all throughout my businesses. But this seniors are my biggest weakness. Like everybody that knows me around me will know that if I see a senior, I'm ready to do anything. My mom like will tell you some stories about how when I was young, I would just literally grab their groceries, walk all the way to their house to bring grocery. I don't know. My brain has been like this all my life. So for me, when I saw the opportunity to bring tech, which is something that obviously continuously evolves, and I know it's the future, my passion for senior care and trying to have an impact and really allow them to have what they deserve, especially in their last months, last years, combined with me running a business and building a team that is there and can have the same impact as me. That was just, for me, it was just perfect. So that was what drove me to do this, but it's obviously very different. AgeTech is different. I think we need to understand that, yes, older adults are aging, but in the end, they're all human beings and they all deserve to have access to what we have access today, and so that we can make sure that they're having a good time.
Stuart, what's the difference between trying to put a software and hardware implementation into a market serving seniors as opposed to trying to do that in some other sector?
I think the biggest challenge is the regulations. And, people are very happy with the status quo. A lot of operators, they have to meet certain requirements, and they meet certain requirements with the equipment that they have currently. So trying to bring in a new innovation takes a special customer. Not everybody's going to embrace it and say, hey, this is great. A lot of people are going to take, not willing to take the risk. So you have to find that special person in the market to sort of generate the buzz for you. I think that's one of the bigger challenges that we found.
And Pooja, you're working in a space that sort of overlaps between older adults, disabilities, and mobility. You could have gone off and done some other robotics or technology focused space. You chose this sector and this particular problem space to be in. What were the particular challenges that you think you picked up as a result of diving into this?
Yeah, and I think for us, that the challenge that I see that exists in AgeTech kind of also does overlap in the disability space, and that is the lack of advocacy, right? So oftentimes the end user that we're serving, either doesn't have the support system to be able to advocate for themselves, or doesn't have that advocacy, if they have someone else that's typically advocating for them. Now it's somebody else making decisions in their lives. And so what that means is oftentimes we have a lot of people to convince and to convey the value to, besides the actual person who's truly going to benefit. And of course, there's a lot of misconception and a lot of underestimation of what our end users can do. So, even back when I was a researcher, when we were even trying to get into do research studies with older adults in long-term care, sometimes there would be this sort of, feedback from therapists that, well, I don't think they're going to be able to do this. I don't think they're going to be able to operate a power chair, but hey, at least it's something that they can do that's different from day to day. So sure, why not? And a lot of times they were actually shocked to see some of their residents actually pick up how to drive a power wheelchair for the first time and actually, do it. And so, somewhere we really need to break down those stigmas. And we see that as well for people with disabilities. There's just all kinds of misconceptions and just underestimation of what they're capable of. And so I think that is a huge challenge, is sometimes just even trying to convince their support systems that this is actually worth a shot. And there is so much potential here. And these individuals are really capable of leading full and meaningful lives and contribute to society like everybody else.
Thank you. Azadeh, you're taking a product into a space that on one hand has a lot of competitors in it, often some very big names are in wearable tech. You're trying to take that specifically to an audience focused on older adults. What particular challenges do you pick up along the way when you decide to go after that particular market?
On one side, we need to convince the angel investors and VCs the very clear path differentiation between us versus the big players like Apple, Fitbit, Samsung, and more. And on the other hand, it is very difficult in terms of manufacturing because we need lots of certification, regulatory. And the other challenge that we find is even running a clinical trials, because seniors is one of the very sensitive, vulnerable group. So it's very hard to run a clinical trials on testing on the wearable technology on them, especially in the area of dementia. They don't want to wear anything. They want to throw out everything. So we have to have several irritations to find a technology which is comfortable for them, easy to use, but at the other side also keep the confidential information in terms of data and so on.
You can have great technology, you can have great ideas, you can have great experience that you're bringing to bear. But in the end, some of getting a business like this off the ground just comes down to money. Money for prototypes, money for experiments, money to get things rolling. Tell me a bit about how your fundraising journey has been. Have you found investors especially focused on the space? And how much time are you having to spend kind of proving out the opportunities that are in the sector to potential investors? And Stuart, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, money. Everything boils down to money. There's not a doubt about that at all. We sort of bootstrap this. We're in our 6th year now. We're really proud of the fact that we don't have a ton of investors and we don't have a ton of debt. And I think the two big key things for us were understanding and taking advantage of government opportunities that were available. We were part of the ISC program. We've dealt with IRAP. We've dealt with ACOA. There's been many government funding agencies that are very AgeWell obviously is another one that promote technology in healthcare and especially Canadian built. So we're really proud of the fact that our product's built here in Canada. It's manufactured in Ontario. It's designed here in Nova Scotia. So that was the one big key thing, and that helped us keep our equity. And then the other thing for us that I think was a big win is that we got an in-market player to invest in our company. And that's a scary thing. Anybody that starts a business will tell you that you don't want to be directed by the dinosaur. You don't want to have that big bully in your backyard, telling you what you do and how to direct it for their interests versus, what's best for the company. But we found a very good partner that let us run the show and develop it in time. We had basically a petri dish within their communities that we could test things and run things and work with things. So I found having an in market, and it also helps you with the marketing side of things. So that was great for the investment side. So for us, the two big things were to have a in-market partner as well as take advantage of the government funding.
Had to be somebody. It was going to be me. Elizabeth, how about you? What, how have you found it bringing in funding, finding investors to get your project off the ground?
Very similar to Stuart. So obviously we took advantage of all the government grants like AgeWell, as well as organizations that were there to support us like IRAP. And then we got investment from a large group as well. So that really helped us out. At some point we actually, and we're still up to today, for every dollar that was invested by an investor or angel, we could get $2 back from the government through grants or programs. So whenever we would approach an investor earlier on, we were saying, hey, like if you give us $1, this is how much money we can get and this is what we can accomplish. So that really helped us out. But in the end, the first thing I tell people whenever they come over and they ask like, hey, how did you manage to close your fundraising and stuff like that? I think it all comes down to relationship. And it's also all about your team. Like in the early stage, they're not going to invest in your idea that much. It's all about the team, who you are, and them putting money into, I know you're going to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of people that will put the effort more into the story and the picture, but in the end, they forget the most important part, which is the relationship building and showing them who you are and why they should trust you and invest in you over someone else. So for us, that was the biggest advantage, was building up that relationship and that network that really got us to, once you close one round or one investor, to introduce us to the next one. And that really helped us out. And by the way, we're opening a funding round tomorrow, so don't hesitate to reach out. Yes.
Azadeh, you're earlier on in this process, and so I'm interested in hearing what your experiences have been, getting that that first round of seed funding together.
Yeah, for we closed our pre-seeds with the $1 million, half from non-dilutive from grants and the other from Love Money. But in terms of seed round, we find maybe it's a bit early for us in terms of the small validation phase that we had it. We talked with a couple of angels and VCs, and we see that they ask too much, and for
Yes.
share as well. Yeah. So it's like we keep our equity, and we're thanks to Quebec province as well, that they are super supportive in terms of startups, female, visible minority, and then AI, of course. So we got a good money from the all federal and provincial government through AgeWell. We got a very good financial support as well. So we have a good money to run for maybe a year. So we will open it after that. We can have a higher evaluations. Everything's much more better.
Hear that, VCs? Don't ask for so much. Pooja, you're a little farther along in the process, both in terms of path to market and having products out there. What's the experience been like for you?
Yeah, so I think similar to Azadeh as well, we did, and I think being an academic, one thing that comes in really handy is knowing how to write grants. So we were able to pull together quite a bit of non-dilutive, over $1 million in non-dilutive, and then we did have early investors like Cabby and Techstars, of course, some more accelerator funding, which was our first forms of dilutive funding. And now we do have interest. It's been really interesting because I never really thought I would take VC money, to be very candid. I thought that, or at least our first forms of funding would come through angel money and so on. But I think we're really starting to see a shift now in impact VCs, in venture philanthropy, and people who are really wanting to make a difference and who have maybe different mindsets than what I guess we're used to traditionally seeing. And so we are now very much open to the idea. We have some very interested investors that are willing to lead around, who are a lot more aligned with our mission and values. And so we're continuing to be strategic in terms of who we bring on our cap table. But for us, it's definitely our mission and values are up there. And in the meanwhile, I'm a very strong believer in building a sustainable business. And so, we've stayed lean and, been really good with cash flow and all of those things, even through COVID. And of course, having a lot of grants to support, women-led companies have absolutely helped us get through some tough phases in COVID as well. So definitely feel very blessed to be part of the innovation ecosystem here.
Some of you are working on products that are primarily or partially focused on long-term care settings. And so I'm interested in what you've learned along the way about building products for LTC that would be helpful for somebody else who's starting to look at that space. What are particular things about working within that environment that you had to learn the hard way? And Elizabeth, I'll start with you.
I think my biggest lesson that I've learned, and that's for any startup, especially in tech, but any product related startup, is all about don't come up with a solution and then try to sell it and push it down people's throat. It's never ever going to work. It's got to come from the other side. So it's going to be, you work closely with the client, let them guide you, let them show you what they need. And then from there, you can build up your product. So I think for us, initially, our first version of the product wasn't really, it was what I thought the issue was, what I thought the solution was. And we ended up not successfully, we were deploying, and it wasn't really fixing an actual issue that would get people interested and want to buy the product. And the second we pivoted, and we also pivoted our mentality of let's let the user guide us. Let's sit down, let's be at the home let's literally live there for a week and really see what the pain points are and how we can help them. And this is really when things change for us. So my biggest advice, I'd say, that we had to learn the hard way is let the customer guide you. They know what they need. And if they have this issue, others will have it as well. So it's all about validation and working closely with them. And yeah.
And Stuart, you're in a similar care space as well. How what did you learn along the way that would be helpful for anyone who's looking at that space?
I think the biggest lesson that I learned is to really understand the stakeholders. When you're going into a project like this, it's so much different than selling something, B2C. You have a number of different stakeholders with different pain points and different interests in LTC. You look at the residents and their families, their primary concern is health and safety. Staff, you have to deal with unions and understand that, with these staff are going to use your product. So you have to make sure you get union approval and so forth and so forth. And then of course, government regulation, you have to make sure you abide by that. So really understanding all of your stakeholders in the environment you're in. It was even in long-term care. If you look at different operations, the stakeholders change quite a bit. You have your non-for-profits, you have your private homes, and the union ones and the non-union ones. So really understanding stakeholders to me was the biggest lesson that I learned.
And did you find that both the difficulty of working in that setting and the urgency of working in that setting has changed over the course of the last 18 months? Long-term care, definitely the hardest hit of any setting during the time of COVID. How did that make that experience different for you?
For us, we were locked out of long-term care right at the beginning because we had no access, when it first started. So we couldn't do any of our implementations. So we spent our time working on our project and working with those stakeholders to get it better. And it just so happens, just by happenstance, we had the best contact tracing system around. We planned on using it for hostile interactions. Well, it just so happens it's good for contact tracing. But, to be honest with you, I don't think there is a lot. The governments, the people that control the money and control the funding and all that sort of stuff, I don't think they feel the urgency. I haven't seen that anyway, personally. There's a lot of talk about how change needs to be made and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of opportunities that people could use right away, but I don't really see it as pressing as I thought it would be. I was very disappointed, especially dealing with provinces and stuff like that they wouldn't take a little quicker action, because there's obviously all kinds of things on the table that can make people better and helpful, increase their quality of life. But I wasn't very happy with the way it was happened.
And Elizabeth, what was your experience in that?
Yeah, for us, it actually opened up a whole new market. Initially, our platform was mostly focused onto retirement homes because this is the initial partner we had. And then as we got into COVID, then the long-term care homes were like, hey, I've heard that with your system, you can not only automate administrative tasks, which will, for us, we can save up to 25 hours of admin task per person. So that just there, 25 hours back per month was crucial, especially during COVID, because they needed this time to be spent on the floor helping out and wearing multiple hats. So the second they heard about it, they're like, we need this into long-term care. And on top of that, they obviously saw how important it was to engage with the residents. I think before COVID, it would be like, yeah, we can run bowling every week and they can show up if they want and we don't really care. And they didn't really understand the impact of social isolation, but I think COVID really put a light on to how crucial it is to engage your resident, how you cannot leave them in their room, especially during the lockdowns, and hope that their health will stay the same. I've heard a lot of people, and obviously it hasn't been fully confirmed, but there's a lot of people saying out there that actually social isolation had a bigger impact than COVID into some of those homes. And the impact that it's going to have on the long term in terms of on the health system, as well as on those homes and those communities, it's just going to be terrible. Because I'm just thinking about my grandma, who during COVID did not leave her room, didn't get interacted with because we couldn't go and visit. All we could do was call her. She didn't walk, she didn't interact, she barely socialized. And today we're seeing it. We were at the hospital with her a few months ago. So it's just the impact is going to be tremendous, and those communities now are realizing we need to engage with those residents, and we don't know how. So Wellbe is the solution now.
We have a couple of startups on this panel who have hardware-based solutions, and hardware, as they say, is hard. And certainly for me, as someone running a company with a significant hardware component, the majority of my work-related sleepless nights have come from the production of hardware. For those of you on the panel who are building or manufacturing your products, what advice do you have for startups that are thinking about having a hardware component in their product? And Pooja, I'll start with you.
Yeah, gosh, where to start? So many.
The answer can't be don't do it. That's it. We'll skip past that.
No, I do it by all means. I think it's very rewarding to build hardware products. I mean, I think it's great. And ironically, I don't have a hardware background at all. I'm a computer scientist. I was a software, had a software background coming into this, but learning, what needs to be done to actually create a hardware product was actually quite rewarding in itself, the process. And I think for me, what really helped us was partly maybe because of the fact that I didn't know much about hardware, made me extremely open to going out and seeking advice from people who knew it better than I did. And so we really tried to not reinvent the wheel. So we actually had great input from Semaphore Lab, which is also affiliated with or connected with AgeWell as well. That does provide a lot of great input to, just things around how to design, how to keep costs down, rapid prototyping. Another thing that really benefited us was being part of the Impact Center, which is also a campus-linked accelerator. And one of the few that actually provided us with a lot of equipment in-house, like laser cutters and 3D printers, where we were able to build a lot of stuff in-house at low cost. So, I think those things really helped generally just getting connected. We had an early grant from OCE, now I guess OCI, that allowed us to actually visit China and got us connected with the Shenzhen Open Innovation Lab there. So we were from connections in China. I had another engagement with Startup Plus to go to Taiwan, and we met with people there, and we've had manufacturing partners come through all of those experiences and adventures overseas. So, I think tapping into accelerators that specialize in hardware is really key. And I think also really trying to get a product out there as early as possible. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I got was, if you're not ashamed of your first launch, you're launching too late. And we most definitely were ashamed of the first version we launched. So, I think we got that part right. And we were in fact generating revenue even in beta stages. So I think that was also very validating for me, because I had made the decision that I was only going to move forward if I could start generating revenue within my first $100,000 of investment. And that's what we did. So those are some things, hopefully that helps.
Azadeh, how about you? You're in the wearable space. You're pushing the envelope of that technology from a sensor's perspective. What's the advice that you would pass on to somebody else who was looking at getting into a hardware-based solution?
Seriously, I will highly recommend don't go. Although that it's really rewarding, it's the reward's gonna come after 10 years. So, if I won't quit, definitely, but as a female doing deep technology and hardware, it's much more than I expected. With the COVID, there is we had a problem with the IC. There is no such IC available in the stock. The price that we bought it for $2, microprocessor, now it's $80, and it's not in the market anymore anyways. And in terms of regulatory, I come with the background of hardware and software in a specifically medical device, because I have a bachelor, master, PhD all in biomedical. But beside that, I learned a lot when I started doing manufacturing with the subcontractor, regulatory with subcontractor. It is very time consuming, going super slowly and super expensive. This is the three things that VCs hate to invest. And if you can go with anything like a SaaS online platform, definitely I highly recommend you to go on that path. Seriously.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you definitely need to start doing meditations and get some consultation right now.
I could not agree more. Stress management is definitely one of the things that anybody working in the hardware space has to learn. Most of you, all of you, are creating solutions that are going into care settings or medical environments. Tell me a bit about the regulatory hurdles. How easy or difficult has it been to navigate? And let's start with Stuart.
Well, that's the number one challenge for us. Being a sort of a modern day nurse call system that doesn't sort of conform to existing UL requirements. So it's been challenging. And the way we've tackled that challenge is sort of two-pronged approach. So we've done one-off sort of pilot projects for each province that we've been in so far. And we've had them come in and sign off on it, which is an extreme pain. And the other thing we've been doing is working with the Standards Council of Canada to have our technology and the specs from our technology reflect in the UL 1069 and 2560. So we're hoping to have that pass through by May. But really, when you get into the healthcare technology, and especially in LTC, it's a laggard. It's not a market that's used to technology. So getting around those hurdles can be very challenging. It's finding the right people to guide you through it. And I think, we've been fortunate with working with SCC and as well working with provincial governments. Really has expedited that for us.
Elizabeth, you took a product and pivoted it partway through a pandemic. Did you find that you had to do some extra fast footwork in terms of regulatory work in order to get that into care settings?
So before COVID, we were already in retirement homes. So what we had to do was to actually just adapt mostly how the reporting was done. So on the long-term care basis, it was more on a one-on-one. So we did have to adapt our platform in order to make sure that we could adapt to the new market we were penetrating. In terms of regulation, we're hearing everybody's story. It's still very painful. We still need those consultation and meditation. Don't worry. But for us, it was mostly like being anything regulations in regards of HIPAA, PIPEDA, and making sure that all the data is secure, safe and secure for those communities. But other than that, we've been pretty lucky so far. And our platform is actually helping those communities be more compliant. So through WellBe, they can make sure that everything is up to date. And if ever they were to get audited, they have everything with WellBe. And even through the past months, we've done an integration with Point Click Care, which is their main EHR software, so that both platforms can communicate to each other and make sure that they're at all time compliant, so that if a resident is into the EHR system, it is also into WellBe, making sure that both systems can talk back and that there's no miscommunication in between the teams.
Azadeh, anytime you get into wearables, into sensors, and especially into real-time data, regulators seem to get really excited. Tell me a little bit about what that process has been like for you.
So our technology, because it is a hardware, it has its own certification in terms of the hardware. We are using AI. AI recently have its own regulatory as well. We are on an online database, which is regulatory for the same regulatory for PIPEDA and other certification in terms of secure and cybersecurity. So we have each challenge. This means that we definitely need to hire one expert in our company to work full-time on all of those, but at the same time, each is dividing to each parameters. So, but even running a clinical trials, if we want to use those data for the final certification, it need also permission from Health Canada that called ITA, Investigation Testing Authorization. It's only filing and getting a permission from Health Canada to run a clinical trial officially in senior home and or hospital on subjects. It takes something between 3 to 7 months.
Right. And Pooja, you're at that intersection of mobility, assistive devices, medical devices, and disability. That brings its own whole set of regulatory approvals to it. How has that process been?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because as someone who obviously didn't have a lot of hardware experience and was with not a lot of business experience, I figured out early that I needed to pick my battles, and I decided regulatory was not a battle I wanted to fight. And so we actually pivoted early on to find that intersection of a product that would solve a problem, but that would also have fairly low barriers when it came to regulatory. And that's how we actually arrived at the blind spot sensor system, which is really just an alert system. And so, we had conversations with Health Canada early on and said, this is actually doesn't really qualify under the definition of a medical device because it's not actually intervening, doing anything. So we don't take control of the chair. We don't integrate really with the chair control system. Which then makes it simply an add-on that anyone can use. It happens to go on wheelchairs. It can go on really any mobility device. And so we've, not had to deal with as many of the regulatory hurdles as a result. I mean, certainly our product pipeline will involve things that are likely more challenging from a regulatory perspective. But that's definitely not a challenge that I wanted to take on early on in my entrepreneurship journey.
And the reason that I spent some time on it is that it's definitely the thing that I end up talking about the most with companies in the age well community. I sit down and think we're going to talk about sales and marketing or technology platforms. We spend 2/3 of our time talking about regulatory and the ability to get this particular certification or this particular kind of stamp on the forms. And so I think it's a good heads up for people that are looking at the sector, either as investors, to look very closely at that regulatory piece of it, but also as entrepreneurs, you're going to spend a lot of time working on issues related to the regulatory side of your business. All of you have chosen to do a startup in Canada, and that's one of those choices that has some benefits and also has some challenges. First thing I'm going to ask you is, what was difficult? What became harder when you chose to be a startup in Canada? And I'm going to start with Pooja.
Yeah, so I loved being in Canada as long as we were in R&D phase. Just because there's so much here in terms of whether it's Shred or NSERC or IRAP, there's just so many resources that you can benefit from in R&D stage. And I think our government seems to like to encourage companies to stay in R&D phase for some reason, because there's a lot of support for R&D, but just not enough support for commercialization. So everyone's talking about TRLs, technology readiness, but nobody's talking about MRLs, right? So we got to the point where, it was fantastic as long as we were leveraging R&D. We've got a ton of interns, and we're also working within the university ecosystem, and we got access to a lot of interns through the university as well, which was great in early stages. And then there was some limited funding for commercialization, but also just sales. It was tricky, just not having a big enough market here. And so we very quickly realized that our initial sales and our initial traction was going to come from the US. And so the way that we kind of work is we do have the majority of our sales coming from the US. We've invested in resources there like independent reps and the sales force there. We predominantly reserve our marketing resources for the US because that's where we get our ROI. But we still continue to keep the R&D here. And what we also leverage here is because of proximity, we tend to engage with a lot of end users in the community throughout the R&D to, beta client programs and so on. And so we're able to stay close to our customer base through that sort of co-creation with users locally. But then when we sell, we're predominantly focused in the US. And we're slowly now coming back to Canada, starting with Western Canada, where perhaps the funding for our devices is a little bit better. But, I think sales is definitely, and marketing and all of that is a huge challenge in Canada for sure.
We're coming up on the end of our time. So I'm going to get a short answer from each of you on one of these next two questions. Elizabeth, what's been the biggest breakthrough so far? The best day, the biggest win? Like, what's been the thing that's felt like the high point so far in your journey?
Good question. I'd say that it's the time that a user reached out to us and told us that they organized a surprise party for a couple, that it was their 66th wedding anniversary, and that it was Wellbe that told them. And it made their day. They cried, and the family still talk about it today. And just starting Wellbe's was worth all of this, just knowing that we had this impact into the life of residents.
Fantastic. Stuart, what is the one thing that you wish someone would have told you right when you were getting started?
Well, it's really just two things, but they're combined. It's going to take a lot more money and a lot more time. Guaranteed, 100%. You think it's a year, it's going to be 100%.
Azadeh, what's been the biggest breakthrough so far? What's been the best day?
Each day that we got a grant is one of the best days, I can say. So we have lots of best days.
Fantastic. And Pooja, for you, what's the one thing that you wish someone had told you right when you were getting started?
I think the one thing I think would just be that you really need to push forward. There's a lot of ups and downs, and you just got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Resilience is I think the key.
Absolutely, words to live by. I would like to thank all of our panelists for sharing their insights today. A lot of questions that we couldn't even get close to, but there was so much good information coming from the people here, both for people that are interested in this sector, people who are interested in starting companies in this sector, and people that are looking for solutions that our panelists might be able to provide. So thanks to all of you, thanks to our audience, and to AgeWell for bringing us all together today.